it is not a utopia. One of the biggest problems in our economy today, and in fact it's been plaguing us the past 5-10 years, is that income inequality has been rising and rising in a rapid rate. Just look at the chart there. This chart just tells you everything. The purple chart is the top 10% of income earners in Singapore. Look at the gap between the top 10% and then the second decile and then the rest of the Singaporeans. It's huge. It's a problem, and it's going to be one of the biggest challenges that I think any government will have to face. We've made it this far, partly because of the policies that we've crafted, what people know as the trickle-down economics, essentially allowing talent, wealth to flow through Singapore in the hope that they'll trickle down to the rest of the economy. Some say that it was one of the reasons why we've moved so fast in such a short time, but this is definitely one of the effects of that kind of policy. And I think even now, government leaders are acknowledging it. The other big problem that we have in Singapore today is that even though the economy is competitive, even though the economy is strong, it competes with the best, we have this huge issue of productivity. Those who took econs would know basically productivity is how much input you put in and how much output you get out. We find in the past year or so, in fact last year I think productivity was negative. It means the more we put in, the less we take out. It comes out of the economy, and it's a problem. This guy is sleeping on the job. Not all Singaporeans are sleeping on the job. It's really a function of a couple of things. One is, well, I'll go into it later, but I should talk about it now, is that for the past five, maybe 8 years, we've basically generated growth mainly from labor inputs. We've imported lots and lots of people, foreign workers, people to come in to build our MRT lines, to drive our buses, partly because of the limitations that we have. I mean, Singapore is just a tiny population, and that's why we are able to punch above our weight despite our small population. But the problem is that companies in Singapore just got used to the idea of cheap labor, keep importing foreigners from Philippines, from China, from India, and they didn't pay attention to how to drive their business without these labor inputs. That's why you have things like in manufacturing, we are way below some of the leaders, 63. Services we're below, and I think construction we are really right at the bottom. And the problem, you go to any construction site now, no Singaporeans work there. And most of them are, in fact, I think something like 80 or 90% are foreigners. I don't know if any of you know this guy. It's the productivity bee in the 1970s. We had this same problem in the 1970s and having it now. Back then, we already acknowledged that it would be a problem and the productivity was falling. We tried to encourage people to get more productive. Like when you go to work, you multitask, you do many things at one time to raise your labor productivity. So this was the mascot then in the 1970s. And then 40 years later, we have this guy. This guy is, he's the chief architect of economic policy here, and he's been on the drive to raise productivity since 2010. It's causing a lot of problems for businesses who complain and complain, but he has been pushing and he's been not stopping, and he's got this 10-year productivity roadmap planned out, and really whether or not Singapore, the Singapore economy succeeds or fails in the next 10 years really depends on how this productivity roadmap pans out. If it fails, I don't know. If it succeeds, most of you probably still get a job in 10 years' time. I'm joking. Okay. So as I mentioned, the foreign workforce is one of the biggest problems or one of the biggest challenges that we've had. A bit of a backdrop here. Singapore has never, up till maybe the late 90s, Singapore has had a pretty smooth ride. We grew at double-digit rates for most of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, except for 1 or 2 recessions between. But essentially, we made the leap from a third world country all the way up to middle income, and then to the high income country in relatively short space of 20, 30 years. But by the time 1997, 98 struck, which was the Asian financial crisis, You can Google it if you've never really heard about it. But the Asian financial crisis was a turning point for many Asian economies in this world, especially in Singapore. We were relatively unscathed, but since then, it's been one crisis after another. So 1997-98 was the Asian financial crisis. 2001 was what we call the dot-com bubble. I mean, it's a bit funny to talk about it now, because in 2000, when the internet was just starting up, people were putting money into startups like Notice Business, a bit like what's happening now in Facebook and all that. But in those days, if you had an idea, you had a website, people would give you $1 million, $2 million, without even thinking. And so everyone believed that the internet would be the next wave of generating wealth and growth. Which it did for maybe about 6 months, 8 months, and maybe a year. And after that, it all fell apart when the recession in the US hit. And that spread throughout the rest of the world because credit froze up. And then it hit Singapore as well. So 2001, there was a recession. In 2003, there was a SARS crisis, basically a flu that hit Asia, and that hit us as well because we were so reliant on the travel industry. And then 2003 onwards, the government decided that they wanted to get Singapore back on the growth track. And I think unemployment then was about 5%. So the intention then was to grow as fast as we could and grab as much opportunities as we could to get Singaporeans back into the workforce. So what they did was to embark on a liberal foreign worker policy, which this figure, 5 million, was I think 2005, 2006, if I'm not wrong, when we were talking about Singapore hitting the 5 million population figure. I think we are now 5.3, 5.4. So we passed that. But when this came up, it was a huge topic. And surprisingly, even though it was a debate, there was discussion about whether we could afford it, there wasn't any angst about it. People just accepted it and said, yeah, okay, I think we can do it. We can have enough resources to do it. We planned so much and so far, and people have basically the trust that we could accommodate 5 million people. This chart shows the growth in the foreign worker workforce in Singapore. 2007 is something like 850,000 people, foreign workers, including domestic maids and domestic workers. And then it basically grew to something like 1.2 million in 5 years. That's the growth rate of like something like 40% in 4 years, 5 years. And that's a massive rate. And then this came along. I'm not sure if, I'm pretty sure you've heard the 6.9 million figure, definitely Facebook or Twitter. But when this policy document came about, and I contrasted it with the 5 million figure, 6.9 million figure was met with so much resistance, so much hostility from, large swaths of population. But the problem was that the problems outlined in the paper are real. They're not made up. But because of this huge surge in the foreign population workforce over the past 4 years, there's this sense, I think, among a lot of Singaporeans that there's too many people who they didn't understand the language, the culture, who are completely different, not Singaporean. And so when the number was trotted out in a press statement, everyone reacted, from the guys in the coffee shop to the working professional. Everyone recoiled at the idea that we could increase our population by what's roughly 25% by the time in 2020, right? Something 2020, 2030 actually. So that's actually 20 years from now. 20% over 30 years is still roughly growth rate of about 2-3% a year, and everyone recoiled. And it's not an economic issue anymore. I mean, this started out as an economic issue, but as Iki pointed out, politics, society, and economics are actually very, very closely intertwined.